music play. You're listening to Court FM. Let the music play.
Good evening. Welcome to Kurt FM on this Thursday evening. My name is Likiani Eli, and on Thursdays, we always have a flip to everything, including conversations that make sense. And that's why, if you tuned in for the first time, we want to take the opportunity to welcome you to the conversation.
Court FM. Let the music play.
Well, and today it's a bit difficult, and should I say, an easy conversation when it comes to what matters. And, during the day, I was just reflecting and I thought about this, bill that has been passed in Parliament that will ensure Kenyans have a reprieve when it comes to taxation, especially on VAT on petroleum products for 3 months. These things happen quite often, especially when countries or governments see that Wananchi are under extreme pressure and they would like to relieve that pressure. Now, one individual I was discussing with told me, Eli, these things don't just happen. These things happen very strategically, especially when you talk about political strategy. But that's not what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about the whole dynamic surrounding the tax aspect and what ordinarily would be referred to as the Overtone window. This, simply put, it's when governments or politicians or politics do formulate policies that for once Wananchi will say it is working for us. Serikali natusikia. And this happens when the incumbents are eyeing a re-election. But then, looking at the dynamics that we are facing today, there are some perspectives to them. Number one, there has been a lot of destabilization in the global supply chain market when it comes to commodities such as fuel. And one will just think, if it is a government that is trying to resolve an issue, therefore the issue they need to resolve is to ensure these products gets to the consumer with little, if not very, subsidized amounts. By that doing, you relieve or you make the consumer, who is your Wananchi at the moment, to actually feel as if the government of the day is taking care of the pinching needs. Now, before we went and arrived to where we are today, there was a backlash about the issue of a scandal that was in the making. And this scandal was surrounding the petroleum product scandal. We have seen the PS coming under fire, some big corporates or bosses getting to resign, and some of them are under investigation by EACC. Now, this is a thing that has happened within 4 weeks. Within 4 weeks, so much has happened. But when the Israel and America escalation happened, one of the main things that governments across the world were coming to say was, we are looking into the situations to ensure that no one will suffer from the pinches that are happening in Middle East. But of course, countries such as Kenya was on a luxury position. At one point, the CS body came out to say that if we are going to worry about the issue of fuel, actually we are one of the luckiest people. As a government, we discuss G2G stuff, and therefore we can assure you, number one, our suppliers have not indicated the insufficiency of supplying this product to us. Number two, we do not necessarily rely on Iran for our oil supplies. And that makes sense. I mean, it will make sense to you and I. Fast forward, everyone was pensing, just waiting to see what exactly will happen when EPRA reviews the prices. And voila, just like you would have imagined, we were shocked, but not so shocked because we saw it coming. But then everyone was asking, how did this happen? I mean, we don't have any shocks from the global interactions. Why is it now EPRA is revising the prices up? It was a big issue. And kidogo, we wake up, or rather we sleep to another publication where EPRA says, we have revised the prices, by the way. tumerevise. Kuna kitu moja tulikuwa tujaangalia, nao tumeangalia. Sasa kwa sababu naona mnateseka kidogo, we and government has decided to discuss, and we are going to take care of that thing. And how are we going to do that? We're going to bring in something called the fuel levy, which will subsidize the pain. Now, today in Parliament has brought a motion in Parliament that was going to address these concerns that you and I had. And by the way, as we speak today, the VAT amount on fuel products is standing at 8%, and this window is supposed to go for 3 months. And that's why I think I am trying to understand how come so far we have seen what we will ordinarily refer to as not family friendly, I was about to say family friendly, but are people's friendly policies. Now, anecdote. Dangote, all the way from Nigeria, was interviewed recently, and he indicated that his company is actually more than ready to supply to the rest of African market needs when it comes to petroleum products and this very important commodity that keeps the engines of economy running. And one would actually expect, with this influx and the demand that is coming, everyone will be running to Nigeria, but not so fast, because Kenya is not really on that list. But we'll get to the details of that. Now, I want us to sit and reflect on that and ask ourselves one question. Why the sudden change of approach to issues of tax? Number two, how is it that suddenly the political class seem to understand the pain that Wananchi are going through, and they are very fast to come up with what I will call quick fixes to the issues we are facing? As I said earlier on, our topic of the conversation today is titled The Overtone Window, and I would love for us to have that conversation. You can request the mic. Let me know what you think about this. And if you're joining us live on YouTube, because you're streaming that through Mizani 254, we are also live on X. We'd love to get your feedback on this conversation. And also, as Wananchi, let me know, how do you feel now that the VAT percentage has been reduced to 8%, and that is on petroleum products? Let me know how you feel about it, and do you think it's going in any way to influence your cost of living, your day-to-day life? I would love to find out what you think, and I already see probably I have a request here. Let's see if I'm able to admit one or two of you. All right, for the moment, none, but I'm waiting, because I would really like to find out from you. Number one, have you been affected, that short period, have you been affected with the pricing of this very special commodity? And number two, do you even think it's really necessary to term it VAT? And that is the charge that is being charged on the commodity we call the petroleum products, among others. But specifically today, we are looking at the taxation on petroleum products, because you and I are constant consumers of this product. We need it, we use it. In fact, some of us leave home to go to work to look for money so that you can buy that product. And I just don't get it. I just don't get it, but I love to find out from you. I would love to invite you now to the conversation. Let's pick up the mic and let's have this talk moving. In the meantime, are you a first-timer here? Would you love to follow our programs? You can do so by simply logging on to www.kotfm.co.ke. That is kotfm.co.ke. KotFM, simply put, conversations on your timeline. And that's why we are here. Wenye magari, uwanja ni wenu. And I'm thinking, and this is the problem we have. This is the problem we have. And I love the fact that you've actually talked about wenye magari na uwanja ni wao, because for a minute, we imagine the issue of, what do you call it? The issue of taxes, especially when it comes to fuel products, it's perpendicularly landing on those who own vehicles. And that's why when this issue was coming up, a lot of you were quoted in the media discussing on how they're going to line up, and they were not so certain on what would be the possibilities of them affording this commodity. That's why walikesha kwa petrol station. By the way, when we talk about mafuta, it's not about just the car. We'll be telling you why. Because farmers, we have is it uranium? What is this? There's a mineral, a part of the mineral that is it's part of the product that comes with it that is used. Urea. Urea is the word. Urea is the word I'm looking for. It's used for your fertilizers. And that has been the bigger conversation, because a lot of pundits have argued the escalations that are courtesy of President Trump of the US will affect us very immensely, because it's a planting season in most of the countries. And that's why this is not just about Watu Magari. Some of you do own trucks and trucks of land. And who is plowing on those lands? Your tractors. Let's find out. Stels, good evening. Thank you for joining me. How are you doing? And do you think this is a peculiar Kenyan issue? Good evening. Okay, so pardon me. I think I had muted that. Kindly allow me to bring you back. Yes, Stels. Stels?
I trust you're all well. Yeah, I'm here.
Good. Go ahead.
I trust you're all well, and this is a very interesting conversation, and one that affects each and every one of us. I want to agree with you on that. So, Sus Love, who says yeye anatumianga scooter. See, I thought the scooters also use fuel. Anyway, it's a very timely conversation, and you've asked a lot of questions. You've laid a lot of background, a lot of context. So I will start with the part where you left and said that, what do we think of the way policies are changing right now? And I want to give I don't know whether you guys know this song, but there's a song by Bahati Bukuku that she sings of two people waligongwa na gari, and then they went to heaven or somewhere where people usually go. So wakapelekwa one place, and then there was all kinds of anasa za dunia. There was alcohol, there were women, there were all the fun activities that we find fun on earth. And then the following day, this person was taken to another place, and this place was very quiet, very peaceful, very boring. You know, sometimes peace is confused, or there's a very thin line between peace and boring. So this person said, no, mimi sitaki huku, nataka huko kwingine ndio kumeweza. So he was taken back, and when he was taken, akapata watu wanachomwa. Akasema siku ndio tulikuwa jana na watu walikuwa, it was very fun and all. Akaambiwa boss, it was campaign season. What am I saying? So what am I saying? It's campaign season. And this Overtone window that you mentioned, I happen to have looked at it somewhere, and you just by the name window, it shows the specific places and areas within which the government operates. So on the extremes, it shows the extreme policies which most governments pick up when they take leadership, when regimes take leadership immediately.
Yeah.
Like how Kenya Kwanza did with the fuel VAT. When they took power in 2022, the finance bill had already passed because they took power in September. That's when the president was inaugurated. Then in the next finance bill, that is 2023, ni wapi kunanyesha? In 2023, the Finance Act came and doubled VAT from 8% to 16% on fuel products. Remember, it was at 8%, while everything else was at 16%.
Yeah.
So there's a sound. I don't know why.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so that describes or portrays the extremes that governments usually go. And even in 2024, when we had the finance bill and we had an uproar of the population, it had a lot of things and a lot of aggressive tax measures. So if you remember correctly, the Finance Act or Finance Bill 2024 was looking to raise around 344 billion alone that year. And this was compared to other finance bills previously that used to raise very small amounts. In the Uhuru regime, the maximum I think we had was around 50, if I'm not wrong. So looking at a finance bill that is looking to raise 300 and something billion, this tells you that there's a lot of changes and aggressive measures within it.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's how it was rejected by the population, and things happened the way they happened, and it was dropped.
Yeah.
So now in between hapa katikati is where we are right now.
Yeah.
We are close to elections in the coming year, and policies have to be very people friendly, policies that are more acceptable compared to policies that a government will pick up immediately they take leadership. So that would be the main reason that we may see some change in tone. Let me call it tone. Some change in tone by the government, and even the policies that we see them coming up with. So basically, that is what we refer to when we say the Overtone political window.
Yeah.
That said, fuel is a very important commodity in an economy, especially ours, and most economies actually. And I hope I will not use a lot of jargon, but I will use some words and explain them. Fuel is usually called an inelastic good, and inelastic simply means that the demand for this product does not respond directly to price changes. What I mean by this is, if prices go up, the demand does not automatically decline, because this is a commodity that is needed for input and energy for most of the sectors in an economy, or in our economy, if not all. You look at the agricultural sector, you need fuel because of what you're talking about: tractors, all the machinery that are used in agriculture. And even when you have these goods, you still need to take them to the market. So at some point, you have to use fuel. Number two, look at the transport sector. This is a sector that is affected directly. Look at the accommodation and restaurant sector. Look at the real estate sector. Most of these places or these areas use fuel. If you look at things like electricity, there is a charge on fuel for electricity. Kitambo and KPLC used to break down prices for us when they were sending us our messages that, okay, you'd see a fuel charge somewhere. So that shows you anything that uses electricity will have a fuel charge. And so if fuel is priced higher, then these input prices or the cost of doing business will also go high. So that's why fuel is a very important aspect or commodity in an economy, and governments also know that. So they target it a lot to raise revenues. In many countries, fuel VAT is and I've used VAT alone because there are other taxes that are charged on fuel, but taxes on fuel in general are a very big source of government revenue for most governments world over.
Correct.
So it's an important commodity, and governments also know that. Back to you.
All right. Thank you, Stella. And by the way, we did you a disservice. Stella is a very interesting figure because this is her area of expertise. And she's here to not just share her knowledge and expertise, but really to have a conversation with us. And that's why we also welcome you. If you're watching and listening in, we will really love to have your perspective. Feel free to pick up the mics. You can also send us your message on +254 714308277 via a WhatsApp message or a voice note, and we'll be able to read it on air. That said, so we've been able to break down these issues in terms of what matters and when it matters. And interestingly enough, you talk about a song that you relate with when it comes to the political matters we're discussing. Now, I'm curious. The change of tune and eventually even Parliament going ahead to approve a 3-month window period in which the fuel VAT will drop to 8%, meaning this commodity, unlike the normal amount, which is always 16% VAT, is going to be almost half the rate on it. Where are these charges when you look at the commodity? Or let's now make it very simple. Let's not complicate the matters. Tuongele mafuta, Stella. Where do the main charges come in? What are the levies that come with this very important commodity, if any? Kindly share with us.
A lot comes with the charges on fuel. And actually, remember I mentioned that governments know that fuel is an inelastic good. So for Kenya, for example, it carries almost 10 taxes, levies, and other charges. So we have most of them, but the highest that we see are VAT and excise duty. So that's what comes in double digit for our fuel in Kenya. And that is added to the landed costs. And landed costs simply means the cost of the product and the shipping costs you pay to get this product from where you're buying it. For instance, we buy ours in Middle East, Saudi Arabia. So for us we buy the product there. Let's say we buy it at 70 shillings, and then we have to transport it from Saudi Arabia to the port of Mombasa, and therefore you have to pay shipping costs. So those added together are called landed costs. So that is added to the distribution costs, distribution and storage. So this is paid to KPC. Remember, KPC was very popular when it was being listed or being privatized. And that is also added to the margins that oil marketing companies get. So oil marketing companies are I'll not name them because you're not promoting anyone, but your fuel stations, the owners or the companies or the parents of those places. So those are the oil marketing companies. They also get their share. So we pay them on the fuel prices that we get to buy products from the petrol stations when we are fueling. So that's majorly it. It's divided into that. And when prices go up globally, we import refined oil. We do not import crude oil. So refined oil is imported in a particular way, and there are costs charged on them. So refined oil will include prices of crude oil and then the costs of refining. Crude oil is yenye tu imechimbwa huko chini, hivyo tu vile iko. You cannot use it like that, so it has to be refined.
Yeah.
So when it's refined, when crude oil, ukisikia tu akisema crude oil prices have gone up, then it means the after product, the product that has been added value, imerefiniwa, will also be expensive. So when Iran, the war in Iran and Israel escalated, there were issues on the supply chain. Remember this name we've had a lot, Strait of Hormuz, where almost 80% or really 80% of fuel for the global use passes. So it had been closed and there were issues. We call them supply chain disruptions. So when that happened, anywhere ukisikia supply imeshuka na demand bado iko high, prices go up. Just look at how, for example, the prices of cabbages work in our local markets.
You mean cabbages is a very special commodity?
It is a special commodity. Ikikosa ndio utajua ni special. So when cabbages are kidogo, like kama saizi venye kulinyesha sana, and when it rains a lot, vegetables and fruits, I'm calling nyanya a fruit, but such items huwa zinaharibika sana, so there's usually a shortage in the supply. So ukikuja kwa soko unapata there's demand for this product, but the supply is very little, so prices automatically go up. So it's the same thing that happened. So when we had that war, automatically prices of crude oil went up because shipping has become difficult and the supply is now lower. There are people who are making a kill out of it, but that's not a conversation for today. But now the prices of crude oil went up, and remember the landed cost I was talking about, it also shot up.
Okay.
For instance, we had this price at 70 something last month, before the escalation of the war. And now for a commodity like kerosene, it moved from less than 100 to 170. For a commodity like diesel, it moved from less than 100 to 133. For petrol, the same thing, less than 100 to 100 and something. So this fits into it trickles down to the consumer prices or the retail prices that we see. So when all of this happened, the government came in and said, we are going to subsidize to cushion the consumers. So subsidy simply means they are taking money from the consolidated fund, and consolidated fund ni ile basket yenye government inaekanga pesa, account ya government. They take money from that account, na hiyo pesa iko hapo ni taxes za wananchi. Tax is what funds that basket. So they take money there, they pay oil marketing companies, for instance, or they pay for the other things that are supposed to be paid, and then the prices now become cheaper at the pump. But it doesn't mean this price was not paid. They paid it, but then the consumer is cushioned. So for a commodity like kerosene, it's an important thing because it's used in most households. Remember, we are not a developed nation, so most of our households will use kerosene, and that's why you saw the government subsidize kerosene significantly, and the prices remained unchanged as opposed to diesel and petrol. So they had subsidized by 108 shillings on Wednesday, and then not Wednesday, on Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, when they reduced the VAT again, remember we have had suckers in this country. They reduced first VAT. Remember I mentioned nikisema mambo ya Finance Act 2023 ili raise VAT from 8% to 16% for fuel. So on Tuesday, because of all of these issues, you had laid context, I remember, they reduced the VAT wakasema tunaitoa 16 to 13%. So prices of petrol and diesel zilikuwa hapa to hapa. 206 for both of them, and then 152 for kerosene. Then on Wednesday, yesterday, they decided, hey, ni kama ni kumoto. They reduced another 5%, ikashuka to 8%. And now, prices of super petrol are at around 197, and then for diesel, it's around 196. But kerosene remains unchanged, but it has been subsidized by around 96 shillings. So it's money being used to cushion the consumer, really. And this is money that we, the taxpayers, have paid. Back to you.
Asante sana, Stella. I mean, for anyone that is joining us and you're trying to, get the context of what we're discussing, we are really looking at the issue of maneno ya mafuta. Yani, that is the easiest way we can put it, and how it affects your day-to-day life now from the Kenyan context. And I know we have people who are trying to join the call, and as always, we are also privileged to have Wycliffe, who is joining us. I'm not certain if he's ready to join the call yet. I'll just wait for him to give me a sign, and then we can be able to allow him to make a submission. But that said, Stella, I am happy that you are able to outline some of the nitty gritties that surround the issue of taxes and VAT for that specific purpose. But before we can take more bite on that, allow me to cue in Wycliffe. And Wycliffe, you can hear me. Good afternoon to you. I hope you are doing well. Good evening. Welcome. To
Good
outline
evening, Eli.
some of the nitty
Just
gritties
confirm you
that
can hear me well.
surround the issue of. Yes. Pardon me. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you well.
Karibu sana.
Thank you. I saw the topic and I wanted to join the call because I think it's an interesting conversation with regard to what's happening in the country. I think for me, whatever has happened in the last maybe few days with the price of fuel and the VAT has been both I think surprising and depressing at the same time. Simply because for me, I feel like for a government that claims to be interested in the welfare of its citizenry, everyone would expect that the government would take care of its people. Now, there's the talk of the G2G agreement that is supposed to benefit Kenyans, but then the simple reaction has been that every time there's a price increase globally, there's an immediate impact on the fuel price immediately. And then on the flip side, you find that something that worries Kenyans and it also worries me as well is that when prices dip, because we've seen the consistent dip in prices of fuel for the longest time, but that hasn't reflected in the local market. And now Kenyans were treated to a sort of a sideshow. And I remember we had this conversation before, and I reported that, there's fuel stations that have started hoarding this product for quite a long time. And based on that, the signs were there that something is wrong because you found motorists on different fueling stations trying to get the fuel at a lower price because the information had leaked out to the public that there was going to be a 40 shilling increase on the price of fuel. So you find motorists who are on the fueling stations before midnight, and if you're still in that queue after midnight, you're being told no, the price has gone up. And actually, one of my neighbor experienced this, and one of the questions they asked the attendant was, "Has the fuel just been delivered right now?" Which sounded very funny, but you can imagine that's how ridiculous this situation is. And then, for immediately less than 24 hours later after the increase, William Ruto pops up and says, "No, we are reducing the VAT." And so we've increased the fuel by X amount and reduced it by 10%. So you think about it and then you're like, what's the ultimate benefit? How are you cushioning Kenyans? So ultimately, the government, in its effort to say that they've r- cushioned Kenyans, they've actually made it more difficult. And so my opinion is on this desire of looking at the full economy from a holistic perspective, because some people think that we love criticizing the government, but there are certain hard realities that we all go through. So, for example, the increase in price of fuel, immediately people will tell you that public transport fares went up around the country, which was not fair to everyone. And then automatically, all businesses that deal in fast moving consumer goods, the people who deliver the milk, the people who deliver the bread every day, guess what happened? Their prices increased immediately. So if you're buying a packet of milk at 60 shillings, you're bound to see it starting to go to 65, close to 70 shillings again. So again, what happens to the spending power of consumers? It's being strained. And so we have a country where less than 2 months ago, we were saying we have more than 3 million Kenyans in hunger. Does the increase of this fuel make it possible for them to get out of their situation? No, it doesn't. And then I bring in another issue that most people seem to forget. When this price of fuel increases, guess what? The cost of power increases because we have a levy for diesel generators that we still pay for our power. So the cost of power is about to increase. And I remember, Eli, we had this conversation last year, and I said, can somebody just track the cost of power and notice that Kenya Power and Lighting Company has been increasing its cost of power since last year in August. And shockingly, by the end of last year, the cost of power had gone higher. If you imagine, we came from a period where there was a lot of flooding. We were being told that our dams are full. Hydroelectric power was at its peak. How come the cost of power never went down? You know? And so from an economic level, you start thinking about it and you're wondering, now the government has also hit another snag with the IMF. They've used our resources and taxes to say we are going to the US to speak to the IMF. Questions have been raised about debt. The same questions we've been asking for the last 3 years. Why are we not auditing our debt? And now, with the IMF blocking this new funding scheme that they want to do, guess what? They're going to come back to the commercial banks, local commercial banks. And guess what is going to happen? They're going to crowd out the private sector again. So the cost of credit will keep being a problem because local market, you and me are unable to get credit. So we are not going to innovate. We're not going to borrow to try out new business ventures. We're not going to borrow to see how can I put money in a money market fund, or how can I invest in a property, or how can I invest in bonds so that I can make an extra income. It's not going to happen. So what are we doing to our economy? It's going to grind to a halt. And just for those people who really doubt that we really know what we're talking about, look at our currency exchange rate. Is it now moving in the right direction? No, it's not. Our shilling is becoming weaker again. So all these efforts, all these conversations that we've been trying to say, that the government is responsible wholly for making Kenyans' lives better, has never been about an individual conversation. It has been a collective conversation that the entire government is responsible. Whether you sit in broad-based, whether you sit in UDA or Kenya Kwanza, whatever they want to call it, all of these people are responsible as a collective of government to make sure that Kenyans are living a better life day to day, including the judiciary. So somebody should be sitting and saying, for example, if the Auditor General flags anything, the ODPP's office should be independent to say, no, we are investigating this. If we have credible data to take this to a prosecution case, let's do it for the betterment of Kenyans. So that Kenyans today, and I'm very sure it's just that we cannot have enough time or enough latitude to communicate to all Kenyans around this country. But I'm very sure there are a lot of Kenyans who are sleeping hungry today because they can simply not afford the cost of fuel. That kerosene is too expensive. Now we go back to using charcoal. I thought we had plans around it to make, cooking more affordable for people. I thought that the interest of government was to make food more affordable for Kenyans. So I sit thinking our economy is looking in a very precarious position. Our debt portfolio is rising through the roof. We have no solutions. We don't have a government that has answers. So as a Kenyan, I feel disappointed because I feel that this hole is only going to get deeper. And much as people are blaming Iran, the war in Iran, we can all sit here and agree whatever the US is doing is not right because it is causing harm to people who are not involved. But then again, what is the government doing to protect its people? Absolutely nothing. They're just wasting our money, traveling to the US, driving big cars. Austerity is like a pipe dream that we see. It's like seeing cartoons on TV, things we know that don't exist. So again, I just felt like it's important to say this. As a Kenyan, I feel very worried. Not because of the realities of where we are in, but I feel worried because the people who have the power and the people who have the resources to cushion Kenyans to make our lives better are actually not doing anything. And they don't seem to have an idea of what to do. So for me, we sit in limbo. Our economy, I'm very very, very reservedly saying that our economy is not going to look well going forward. And remember, next year is an election year.
Yeah.
So much as people say, no, but money will come through campaign, money will come. It will come, but will it come when we are still surviving? Will the money be spent when businesses are still thriving? That's the question we're all asking. So, what kind of a country are we building when almost 40% of our population is struggling? I don't see a future there, unfortunately to say. Thank you, Eli. Back to you.
Asante Sana, that is Wycliffe, and is asking a lot of questions in terms of what kind of a country are we building. Of course, goes ahead to question and actually remind us of the historical perspective we've had on how we do policy, on how we govern this country. Uh, I'm particularly interested in the aspect you say nothing that they are doing is enough. Um, what would be the alternative, Wycliffe, if government was to really sort out the issue of cost of living, specifically with the issue of fuel? What would be the specifics that you think should be done?
One, and thank you for the question. I think for me the conversation should start in terms of transparency. I think all Kenyans should be able to understand what is the landed cost of this fuel that we import. Then number two, we need to understand what's the breakdown of all these individual taxes and where these taxes are used. So that now we say, okay, for example, we are talking about building roads, like William Ruto talked about building a road to Modagashe. And people made fun of it. But then we had a very interesting question. I myself asked a couple of my neighbors, are we really talking about building a road, a new road, when we can't even maintain the ones we have? You know, Nairobi is a capital city. We have a drainage problem. Every time it rains, it floods. So are we talking about building when what we already have we can't maintain? And yet we pay taxes for it. So we need to have one visibility of what this money is for and what it does. Then number two, it's sort of being realistic. We all know, we all agree, the government does not have a revenue problem. It has an expenditure problem. So why is it that we sit here and not ask ourselves very simple questions? When the son of the sitting president procures a vehicle worth 100 million, don't we all sit back and start asking ourselves very strange questions? And I remember when Barack Obama visited Kenya, he said something very interesting. When you become the president and all of a sudden your brother or your family members start driving big cars, questions will be raised. It's a very interesting statement. Many people forget what he said, but it's something that we should all have picked and said governance is not about how many cars you're driving. What nature of cars are you driving? Governance is about transparency and responsibility. And today, honestly speaking, I don't think there's anyone in parliament who can really defend our expenditure. I really don't think the president can defend his expenditure. I really don't think the deputy president can defend the expenditure. So, if we want to talk about the cost of living, let's see the austerity kick in. I've said this before, and some people have felt very offended when I've asked this question, but I simply asked, why are we paying the president a salary, yet he's living on our taxes? He's occupying State House, which we pay for. His food budget, his travel budget, his clothing budget,
Yeah.
we all pay for it in our taxes.
Wait,
So
wait,
why, in addition to this, are we paying a salary?
wait a minute. Let me just ask you, Clive, because you talk about the issue of austerity measures. And for me, austerity measures has never, in the recent history I have and memory, probably we had some plastic austerity measures, but has never been from the political class or the serving political elites. Are you not afraid of what this will mean if it actually got into implementation? Because I am looking at the civil service, I'm looking at teachers, for example, I'm looking at government refusing to hire new doctors, I'm looking at government saying, well, we need to save money, so we don't need any more, I don't know, any military service, whatever it is, don't you think it might be a sloppy slope to take?
No, 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 no. Let me be very categorical in saying this. We have members of parliament who earn 1 million shillings every month. We all know their salaries. Yet, we have doctors who don't get paid. We have nurses who don't get paid. The issue on austerity is not who is getting paid or who is not getting paid. It is, can we cut down the expenditure for those people who we really know are wasting resources and put those resources in places where we know it would work? You know, we are paying more for healthcare, for example, in this country. Why is it that nurses at Kenyatta National Hospital were striking the other day? You know, those are questions we need to ask ourselves as a people and start saying, okay, fine. If an MP who has access to a mortgage facility, who has access to an asset financing facility, if they drop their salary from 1 million to 700,000, what would that 300,000 do for?
But allow me just on one thing. The million aspect, I don't think it's very accurate because from figures that are available, a basic, rather, the collective salary of an MP in Kenya is slightly 739,000 Kenyan shillings, which includes the basic salary 443, 760, and about 150,000 for the house allowance and salary adjustment, which was in the market by 2024-2025 financial year, which was 145. So I think the million is a bit rather exaggerated. You think so? You share the same opinion?
Let's take your data, 736,000. If an MP salary drops from 736,000 to 500,000, for example, because these are public servants, right? We agree they're public servants. So what would that 200,000 do in terms of healthcare per MP? How many more teachers will we be able to employ? How many doctors will we be able to employ? And notwithstanding, besides their salaries, how much access to money do they have in NGCDF? You see, all this money that MPs have access to would be better placed being used in other places. And that's my point. We've put in money in saying, no, we are building Talanta Stadium. People are saying, great, very good. I agree. But where are the programs to encourage athletics, to encourage sportsmen and women to go in and expose their talent to the global environment where they can earn a living? Where are those programs? You know? So for me, instead of them just using money, we've all heard how much money the deputy president has just spent in transportation. Don't you think that money would have been useful for those nurses who are striking? Don't you think that money would have been useful for Kenyatta National Hospital, for example? Imagine a situation whereby we say, instead of whining about our travel expenditure for our members of parliament, which they exploit very heavily, why don't we talk about getting level 6 hospitals in every single county? Imagine the impact it would have. Imagine the impact of having social programs that encourage people to understand that white collar jobs are not the only path to success, that blue collar jobs are available in every single county so that we don't have people migrating into the city every morning and leaving every evening. There's so much that can be done. But we are paying people, for example, Oscar Sudi, how many times has he shown up to parliament? It's a very interesting question. So if you add in totality of all the years he's been a member of parliament right now, all that salary, what has it done for his constituents? How has that money that he's earning serving us as Kenyans? That is the real question we need to be asking. So for me, I know people tend to get very personal about this, that it's personal attacks. But for me, holistically speaking, if you can save out of the budget and trim that budget of expenditure from 4 trillion to 2 trillion, what kind of a country will we be looking at? Wouldn't we be having a different conversation, Eli? Wouldn't we be saying that we can put more resources in ensuring we have food security? When this war in Iran started, we had countries saying, no, we are accessing our stockpiles, our reserves of fuel.
Yeah.
In Kenya, don't we have reserves of fuel that immediately price per barrel of oil changes and immediately price changes in Kenya? I mean, you'd think we live in Iran or we live in, the Arabian countries that produce oil, that price is impacting us immediately.
Yeah.
We'd think that is the case,
Yeah.
but it's not the case. So there has to be some realistic conversation where guys can accept, yes, we've all made a mistake as Kenyans. We've chosen bad leaders for years. We've chosen bad leadership. This is the point where we turn a corner. This is the point we stop. It's the fork in the road. We have a path to choose. Let's be realistic in how we choose it. Let's not accept the mediocrity of saying, no, but public servants should earn because they also have families. But imagine if they just took a 30% pay cut. How much more would that help this country?
All right.
We
So
would get serious people in public service.
yeah.
That's my point.
All right. I hear you, and well, I have my different look on what you've said, especially on the issue of the cutting of expenditure. Really, in my view, looking at parliament will not really be ideal, especially if you just are looking at their salaries. That one, for me, would not cut a big one, but I have reasons as to why I think that will not. But if we were to deploy the austerity measures, then my fear will not really be what Parliament will decide to do on parliamentarians. There are just 350 of them. They can fight to survive together. And, they have the upper hand in the policy aspect. However, we are trying to look at a very interesting talk when it comes to the issue of VAT and specifically the issue of fuel products and how they affect your day-to-day life. Let us know what you think about the same. Let me cross over to you, Stella. You've listened from Wycliffe, who has different arguments and has different proposals on how we can fix these unending expenditures that are putting pressure on the Kenyan shoulders. What's your take, Stella? Welcome back.
Thank you very much. I just want to say that remember I mentioned subsidies. So even these subsidies that are coming in from the government are expenditures. So it's still being paid by the taxpayer because it's money from the consolidated fund. No money comes from the pockets of politicians or somewhere else. It's either taxes or debt. I am usually afraid for years preceding election and the election years because of the aspect we spoke about, policies that are friendly. When you have policies that are friendly and expenditure that is run away, most of the times you will see debt skyrocket because expenditure has to be financed. And if you're reducing your revenue raising measures, then the only plug will come from debt. That notwithstanding, I will not turn a blind eye to the expenditure that we have as a country. There's a lot of things and a lot of line items that could be cut or could be reduced to ensure that we have a lean expenditure, but that's not always how governments choose to work. Actually, most governments will always go with austerity for increasing revenues and never austerity for cutting expenditure. But they go very well if you increase revenues and reduce expenditure, because then you reduce the gap between revenues and expenditure. But if you're increasing expenditure and at the same time increasing revenues, and in this case, find that the expenditure is growing at a faster rate than revenues, then you risk the deficit being higher, and then this means that the borrowing both domestically and external, will be higher. And all of the other problems come in with a fiscal indisciplined government. That said, I wouldn't look at parliamentarian salary a lot compared to Cliff, because when you look at how taxation works in our country, the take-home salary for our parliamentarians may be less than 490,000 shillings because of the taxes that are deducted. You have your SHA, you have your housing levy, you have your NSSF, and all the other things that we have. So I'm assuming, I'm taking a rough figure or a flat figure of 500,000 for the 350 members of parliament. And if I multiply that by the 350 by the flat figure of 500,000, I'm getting something in the lines of 2.1. Now 175 million in a month, 2.1 billion in a year. If you cut 30% of this, that's 630 million. So this is money times very many times that we can get elsewhere, and that has been misappropriated or misused. Let me use that word in quotes. But the areas of cutting expenditure are so many in our government, so many. However, I am putting another however. The issue of using money is very specific to the value, very specific. Because if we are getting value, even 50% from where we put in our money, then we would be very far much better. You spoke of education. When you look at the structure of our budget, education gets most of the funding. It gets around 600 plus billion per year. It's followed by defense. It's then followed by healthcare at 200 and something. And all of these, you have to try and look for the value. Because even with the 600 and something billion that is being allocated for education, there are still children who are not taught by teachers. There are still teachers who have not been employed by TSC. There are still capitation money that has not been sent to schools. There's still problems. Same way, we have in one particular year, a class of 800,000 pupils who are graduating from high school, and maybe just less than a half are going to campus. So where is the value? You see, if you're paying all of this money or allocating all of this money to education, then we have to see the output. We want to see students passing the examination. We want to see education everywhere, in even the most rural place of our country. We want to see the value for where this money is going. If we have allocated all of this money and still we have students who are not being educated, then we need to change how we are doing it. You know, if it will call for digitization and we have a one-off budget for that, na sile digitization ya tule tu computer tu yellow, like proper digitization where we even have similar kind of content being taught across board. Like a student in Pokot and Turkana is learning the same thing in the same way a student in Nairobi is learning. We need to look at such matters. If you're looking at the health sector and a lot of money is being pumped into this particular sector, then we have to look at where the problem is. We need to see value. We need to create value out of the money that we are paying. But maybe that is the thoughts of the citizens and not necessarily the thoughts of the government and the leadership that we always have. Because again, I think money confuses people. When they go to a place and there's a lot of money, they personalize it. They look at it like money. Because you see, if you ask people who work in banks, they will tell you that, especially tellers, they will tell you that they don't look at the money that they are counting as money. Because if you look at it like that, it distorts your mindset. They look at that like a tool for work. It's not your money. Same way, I think even in the political space, people or servants, politicians need to look at these things as tools of facilitating value and servantship towards people. Because if you look at it as money and something that you can actually pick for yourself, then it becomes troublesome. So for me, I insist on value, regardless of the money we put, regardless of how other countries are doing it, regardless of what is the norm. We need to look at where value is for us, specifically what works for us. Because even if we took the whole of our budget today and put it in education, utasikia tu watoto Turkana wanasoma chini ya mti. You will still hear such things. So the how is missing a lot. The how, it's always how much, but the how the service is being offered, the how the money is being used is never a problem for us, or is never a discussion in most of the rooms that we discuss these issues of expenditure.
Well. Thank you very much, Stella. You really bring in a different perspective in terms of what should be looked into when addressing the issue of our expenditures, our debt ratio to GDP, among others. And by the way, during your presentation, Wycliffe, you mentioned the issue of IMF, and of course, IMF has raised concern. According to the IMF, the fiscal burden associated with the interventions that the government of Kenya is giving, that is on the tax cuts, will have very serious medium term and long term concerns in debt sustainability. And maybe the issue of debt will never run away from the issue of the taxes that we get to pay or we face in our commodity prices. And that's why we think it is important for us to really look at these things holistically, and maybe to just bring back quickly, because I see his hand is up. Think about this for a moment. We have 350 members of parliament, that is including the nominated members of parliament and the women rep. And on top of that, we have actual 290 constituents. All right? And among them, every Kenyan, according to the current delineation, they are represented in parliament with their elected representative. So what happens if we say, let's fold, we don't need more MPs? What happens if we say, let's cut on your salaries because you're not working enough or you need to take a pay cut? Will it dissuade the politicians from looking for this seat? Because if really the issue was the salary, as many will want to argue, how many of your members of parliament are rich or known to be wealthy? Your guess is as good as mine. If you look at their historical, available public information on their wealth, well, they will boast of being wealthy. And some of them, they can say, biashara zangu. They can never show you the biashara itself, but you call biashara zao. And on top of that, they still will do anything and everything to get elected. So the question is, why is it important for them? And again, I don't want to get away from what we're discussing on VAT, but I'm just thinking, if we are going to solve the issue of debt or our fiscal discipline and say we are doing austerity measures, I'll be cautious about the members of parliament. But Wycliffe, your hand is up.
Thank you, Eli. I'll start by asking a very interesting question, and it begins with our taxation policy, our tax policy as a country. First question would be, what is the definition of value-added tax? And do Kenyans understand what value-added tax is? So, for example, somebody will tell me, for example, if I open a business today and I am making the milk, and I want to distribute this milk. I have spent a lot of money getting equipment. I spent a lot of money feeding the cows. I actually spend a lot of money buying the land, which I have already paid taxes for, right? As the investor. But then again, when I want to put my milk on the shelf, the consumer is told to pay a value added tax on it. So, do they really understand what that value add is that the government is charging? Because, per my recollection, the investor has done everything up and including distribution to the point of sale. So now the question then becomes, do we really understand our taxation policy and why we charge VAT on certain products and why it is that we charge 16% and not 10% or not 40%, for example? Then here comes the ridiculous bit. And this is why I say sometimes as Kenyans, we are very interesting people because we are accustomed to understanding hardship and getting used to the hardship. Because here's a reality. We all have this conversation about why it is that we need to pay taxes. And we say that we are represented by members of parliament who share or who should share our interests in the conversations in parliament to help better our living. So, how come we find it so normal that our healthcare centers don't work? That each and every month, and if you take a poll, I can guarantee you each and every one of us has been involved in a medical appeal in the last 12 months. I can bet you almost 100% of us have been involved in a medical appeal. So, why is it that we are paying more for healthcare and we still have to dig in our pockets to help people get healthcare? We are accustomed to being told things, we are being told that this doesn't work. But as a people, we take it lightly and we say, no, we accept it. Public service is not about the wealth somebody has. That's my view. Public service is about what you do for the better good of the people. We all know that our members of parliament, our so-called elected representatives, are very highly paid compared to most in the world. We know they're highly paid. And then what Stella says makes a lot of sense. What value do we get from what we pay? And hence why I said, if you go to private, if you think about it, look at private sector. If you're employed, you have KPIs. And if you don't deliver on those KPIs, you're fired. Or you get certain docks. You get dinged for not performing. There is reward for good performance. Why is it that we don't have KPI systems in public service? People tend to think that public service is royalty. When they come in, they sit there and they think, no, I can do and act the way I want, and there's no consequences. That's the country we live in. Don't we find it funny that today is a weekday, right? Any reasonable adult in this country would tell you, this is a weekday. I should be working. Either I'm employed or I'm in my business. I need to be doing something that has economic gains. But what do we see today? A president on a car rooftop on a street in this country, and people are flocking around him. Is that an economic activity? For those who are there, as we've all had the rumors that people are paid to show up, that's an economic activity to them. They're earning for the day. But the truth is that the kind of country we should be living in? That we have people who wait for a certain politician to show up to earn a living? That's not the country we need to live in. How many businesses, for example, if I ask Eli, and maybe these statistics should be studied even further, in the last 3+ years, how many businesses have left this country? How many businesses have downsized? how many more people have become unemployed? And yet, our so called public servants are spending more. And that expenditure is not only through their salaries, it's also through their borrowing, because it's an expense to us, as Stella said. So the real question is, again, what Stella says is value. If we are charging VAT at 10% or 8% on fuel, what is that VAT doing for us as a people? Is it fixing our roads? Is it making sure that tomorrow, if I want to wake up, I have good public transport that is affordable to me? And guess what? The biggest players of public transport is not government, it's private sector. So if I ask Kenyans the real questions, because sometimes we want to excuse and say, no, this is normal, this is the way it works. A very interesting question would be, when you buy, my first example, when you buy that milk and pay that 16% VAT, you see it on the receipt. What is that VAT doing? Why is government charging me that VAT? And I will tend to end on this and maybe give a proposal. There are countries outside of Kenya where you earn your money and you have to pay your taxes, not the employer. You have to pay your own taxes. And you will have the revenue authority or the revenue services come to you to pay your taxes. Why do they do this? It's because they understood that people need to understand that you pay taxes and you see the service, you see the healthcare, you see the security working for you. You see government investing in infrastructure where you are. And so when you don't pay taxes, there's a penalty to pay because you are seeing what your taxes can do for you. But here in this country, automatically, pay as you earn is an automatic number for government. It comes. And guess what? Government will not follow you and me when we are the employed for pay as you earn. It has an automatic password it can follow. Who is the employer? So employers are required to submit this pay as you earn. They are required to submit this NSSF. They are required. It is a requirement. It's mandatory. It's not voluntary. So imagine in this case today, if we just changed the policy and we said, no, employers are not required to remit these taxes. Let the employees remit the taxes. Would you want to guess? Would you want to imagine how many Kenyans would actually remit?
I,
Interesting question, isn't it?
I doubt if Kenyans will do that.
Exactly.
We will go
Because we
broke,
don't
my friend.
feel,
No,
no,
it's not
it's
because we don't
because,
feel. Let's just be
no,
sincere, my brother.
no, let me say this, Eli.
Yes.
I don't think Kenyans feel like the taxes we pay actually work for them. And that's the truth. Because we pay for things we do not see results for. And
Who
forget,
is this
people can
one
say, no,
person that will generously work and give government their money? Show me one.
they don't exist.
They
They don't
don't.
exist.
And that's why
Yes.
these policies and systems exist to ensure collection is done. But I
But let
still
me tell
get
you,
your point. I just want you
let me
to
ask a
wind up. Yeah.
question, Eli. Sorry.
Yes. Go ahead.
Let me ask a question as I conclude. People talk about historical problems. And I say, okay, history is interesting because history is relevant if you've ever experienced it or you have somebody who's experienced it who can tell you about it. For example, you can't say you felt the effects of World War One unless you meet somebody who either experienced it or their parent experienced it. When they tell you about it, you can understand the feeling behind it, right? So I will not talk about taxes since colonial times because people say, no, these are colonial problems. Okay, fine, I agree. But I was too young then to understand what the impact of colonization left us with, the kind of problem it left us with. But now I'm an adult. I can ask things that I have experienced, things that I interact with every day. We started paying for affordable housing, for example. How has that impacted Kenyans? I still pay it every month. I pay for that housing levy. How is it impacting my fellow Kenyan? Is it benefiting? I don't think so. I have already increased my contribution for SHA, just like all the MPs make noise about. I still also pay. But the question is, how is my fellow Kenyan feeling about it? When I keep seeing on social media a new medical appeal, then I ask myself, is SHA really working? You know, so that's something I can relate to, because it's 3 years old. It's not 30 years old. It's just 3 years old. And that's why when we say things don't work, it's something that we have a measurement tool. We can say, okay, you took this money from my pocket. You said, this is what these taxes will do. If you don't achieve the primary objective of that promise you made, then I feel I'm not in a wrong place to say you have failed. And that's my point. People need to start looking at it practically and asking the hard questions. Where are we today versus where are we 3 years ago versus where are we 10 years ago? As long as it touched you and affected you, then we must go back and also ask ourselves, what is VAT? What does VAT mean for you and me? Government is charging that value added tax. What value have they added to a product or a service for them to say you have to pay it? There must be a cause and effect, cost benefit analysis. So if I'm paying a cost, I must see the benefit. That's just how it works. Thank you, Eli.
That is how it works according to Wycliffe, and very heavy, perspectives in terms of the whole issue on VAT. I was laughing as you made your presentation, not because it's funny, it's because these are things I've been trying to crack my head throughout the day. What is VAT? And we have slightly 10 minutes to go off air. I would love to have you, Stella, make your remarks on the same. And if there are any additional points, I'd love for you to do. Stella, if you can, kindly pick up the mic.
Thank you, Eli. So VAT is a I think, let me not say it's a confusing tax, but it doesn't it's not charged as it's supposed to mean in terms of value added tax, but scholars historically have portrayed it as a consumption tax. So when Cliff was speaking, I remembered about it, and I think when you look at how the tax that is being collected is being used, is different from when we say that value added tax is being charged. Because value add here is me taking milking a cow and adding preservatives and putting it in those 2 cartons. So I have added value to it, and now I sell to you.
Which
When you talk
already
of
have
bread,
been taxed, those preservatives. But go ahead.
okay. Me talking about bread, I took my wheat flour and I baked, and therefore I am charging a tax. So when it comes to fuel, VAT is charged based on this product has been made accessible. Under value addition metrics, there are a couple of metrics including utility, whereby you making a product accessible to a particular place, or you taking a product from one point and taking it to the end user or consumer, it's considered as value addition, and that's why again VAT is charged on fuel. However, I have my own reservations and my own propositions on how I think, if the government is really into cushioning the consumer at the end of the day, then I think this particular tax should come in as a specific, an absolute value, same way we've done for excise duty. Why I say this is because any day, anytime, I know that fuel will be charged, let's say petrol will be charged 25 shillings excise duty. Diesel will be charged, let's say 18 shillings excise duty. However, for VAT, all these other taxes will be added to the landed costs and the distribution costs, operating, what do we call them? Oil marketing companies, and everything that is charged on fuel will be added together, and then VAT will be calculated as a percentage of this total. So it makes it very expensive if landed costs increase, or if, for instance, the way we did with the road maintenance levy, increasing it from 18 to 25, if that happens, then VAT also increases. But if we have a specific absolute tax, call it whatever, consumption tax, as long as it's an absolute figure, then it would make more sense if you're talking about cushioning the consumer. This has been used in a couple of other countries, but most countries use VAT as a whole. However, remember, I made a specific argument that regardless of what other countries or other jurisdictions are doing, it's important to always localize problems and actually look at things that work for us. Because as I started giving my contribution or submission on this particular topic, I said that fuel is used in many industries. So if we are able to reduce the costs of doing business in our country, then we will increase production, we will increase demand, we will increase attractiveness, and all of those things that come with ease of doing business. Because at the end of the day, if the input prices are high, definitely the output prices will be high. And therefore, if this input we are calling fuel is high, every other thing becomes high. And you will see it in inflation, you will see it in food, we have already seen it in bus fare. So it will trickle down, it has a ripple effect. So I have a problem with us charging a percentage on a commodity that we think is something that is so important and critical in the economy, and when we purport to say that we are cushioning the consumer. Because you see this back and forth, I want to say that the government has a lot of data. It knows everything in terms of what is demanded in the country, what is used. It knows how maybe demand changed after we had an increase in VAT in 2023. It knew how demand was when fuel was exempted from VAT, when it was at 8%. It knew all of this. So it's very possible to actually use this data and look at the revenue maximizing point, considering all the other sectors of the economy that use fuel as an input. So this should be able to tell them that if we have 6%, for example, as VAT for fuel, we are going to be able to maximize on the other revenue collections from the different sectors, from foreigners who come to set up shop in our country. We will be able to maximize that. Or it's 8%, or it's 10%, or it's 0%. So the point is, we are looking at where are we maximizing our revenue collections at. It's not what other jurisdictions are doing, and it's not the low-hanging fruits that we have right now, and then exchange this for a future that may be mayhem and problematic because of the debts that we are taking in right now, and we will need to repay them back, yet we have not invested well enough with the money that we are borrowing right now. So the problem lies therein, and it's important for the policymakers and for the people that are in charge of putting up these or adjusting these taxes to be able to understand and sit down. I know they do sit down, they do have meetings, they have all of this data. But if we were able to just stop picking the low-hanging fruits of, let's just start this VAT. We are not looking at the structural issues, the problems that an economy has, the things that an economy needs to be able to grow, the vamping up of production and all of those things. If we work on those, I am positive that we are going to expand our revenue collection areas and even production that will, at the end of the day, bring in more revenues for the government, as opposed to just hiking something or a particular rate. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Stella, and I appreciate your submission. You actually tackle the issue of VAT, and I hope now it makes sense to all of you when we talk about value added tax. I've always tried to think hard. Where is the value of a commodity? Is it during conception or when it gets to the market? At what point is the value more important? And that's why probably the aspect of consumption comes into play. Wycliffe, I'm going to take your last 2 minutes, if you don't mind. I see your hand is up.
Yes, Eli, thank you. I'd just say this. Stella has very adequately explained where the value addition comes in. The real question then becomes, who is adding the value? Is it the producer or is it government? And if government then is to charge the tax, should they charge the tax on the value addition or charge the tax on the entire product, landed cost, that is? So it's a very tricky situation. I know some people might find it difficult to understand somehow how we look at it from that perspective. But from where I sit, I think Stella is very adequately right in saying that the government should reduce the cost of doing business. 100% agreed. But then again, this equation has to be balanced. That much as you're making the cost of production or cost of doing business cheaper for the investor, for the entrepreneur, for the producer, then I think there's also an element of looking at it from the consumption end, that people need to have more liquidity in their income, disposable income. That's what the terms people hear. If you have more money in your pocket, then things like impulse buying don't become a problem. You know, people tend to be more extravagant, if I can call it that way, when they have more disposable income, when you're not worrying about certain costs and meeting a budget and tying in certain costs versus expectations. So if today government were to make it that each one of us as employees of this country should earn and should have 30% extra of our earning salary, I can bet you that if businesses also incur the same 30% reduction in their cost of doing business, their sales would go up immediately, because the product cost becomes cheaper. As a consumer, I have more money in my pocket, I will tend to buy more. It's as simple as that. So if we are looking at this country and seeing the realities of everyday living, that businesses in the Nairobi CBD are closing left, right, and center, businesses in Nairobi are struggling to meet their expenses, I think there's some reality that needs to kick in. And economists talk about Laffer curve, that you cannot tax a country into prosperity. Those are the realities we are facing right now. So for me, I think it's an interesting conversation, much as I know people don't like talking about the economy every time because it's a difficult subject. I think making it more realistic for people to understand that if petrol goes up by 5 shillings, it equals to maziwa kuongezeka, it equals to mkate kuongezeka, it equals to bus fare kuongezeka. That's the conversation people need to understand, so that when we say government is failing somewhere, somebody needs to understand why we are saying it. It's not an attack, it's just a realization that somebody is not doing what they're supposed to. And I agree with Stella when she's talked about the subsidy. It is a cost and we're still paying for it. So it is not really a cushioning by government. It's just an expense that is being appropriated from whatever we already pay. So thank you, Eli, for this conversation. Thank you, Stella, for also being an economic expert in some of these conversations. And I thank the audience for listening in. I think these conversations should continue, not only about VAT, but also people needing to understand the different taxes we pay. I hope that one day we'll get there when people
Definitely.
can start asking what pay as you earn does. But thank you, Eli. Thank you, Mizani team, for always having these conversations. and enjoy your night. Thank you.
Asante Sana, that is Wycliffe, who was joining us also to just be part of the conversation that has been happening on your timeline. That is conversations on your timeline, courtesy of Court FM. I know people have been trying to say, hii court ndio nini, si mmesikia? Conversations on your timeline. It is exactly 18 minutes after 22 hours Nairobi time. Thank you for joining our Thursday conversation. And unlike the other throwback Thursdays, today we decided, like last week, we were patriotic Kenyans. This week, you are very economically engaged. And that's why I want you and I to listen to Spend My Money, courtesy of Tetu Shani, who tells me, Uncle, hiyo kitu ni kama kidogo mulianguka mtiani, because some people love when their monies are spent. So let's get into it. And if you're streaming us on YouTube, you can always shift on to our radio stream, because we are not allowed to play music on that end. However, you can listen through www.courtfm.co.ke. My name is Likian Eli, on behalf of Bizani team, Court FM, and of course our guest speakers, Stella and Wycliffe. Thank you for always making these conversations make sense. Good night.
You're listening to Court FM. Let the music play. Court FM. Let the music play.